Hello, everybody. Warm welcome from Linnea and Sebastian. Maybe Linnea, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, so I'm Linnea Erlich from SUNZINET. I'm a creative consultant, senior UX designer, and brand expert. And yeah, I have had a few years experience with accessibility, and that's why, yeah, it's a topic close to my heart, and that's why we are talking about this. But we're doing this together with our CTO, Sebastian Spill.
Yeah, thank you, Linnea. As Linnea said, I'm Sebastian Spill, CTO at SUNZINET. And today we would like to give you a talk about accessibility, how to make web design for everybody. It's a really hot topic. As many of you might know, in 2025, there is a law. Yeah, but Linnea will tell you some details about the law and the timing aspects. So I don't want to start too early with that. Um, to give you some background, we work for SUNZINET. SUNZINET is a full-service digital agency with headquarters in Cologne, but we also have locations in Poland and Austria. Our headcount is approximately 160, and our main solutions we offer are business platforms based on Typo 3, for example, but also other CMS solutions, e-commerce, business platforms, as I mentioned, and also digital marketing, CRM, and digital workplace, also known as intranet solutions. We have a really long history in Typo 3. When I started 17 years ago, SUNZINET was already working with Typo 3. I think version was 3.8. I don't know who of you know this version, but yeah, the structure from the backend was like it is nowadays, but yeah, it looked completely different from graphical user interface point of view. But it was a nice system, and SUNZINET is also solution partner and Typo 3 Gold member. And yeah, many of our employees are certified of the various certifications Typo 3 offers. But now let's start with the main part.
Yes, thank you very much. So, to give you an overview about accessibility, it's really not going into the technical side straight away. We're going to come to that later. What I really want to do is, proposing to get a mindset about this because it does make accessibility easier that way when you start really thinking about this. So, because accessibility meaning people could have a so called barrier, the spectrum is incredibly diverse. Now that the screen was flickering in the beginning, I just thought, hopefully, he is nobody with epilepsy, for example. That would have been a big problem. Somebody with epilepsy sitting here and looking at a screen which is flickering. So it's physical, it's cognitive. You could also have like learning disability, or yeah, I mean the range is just incredible. Also, and that was the thing that made me realize this, you can get a barrier anytime. You can have an accident or something can happen with your eyes, whatever. So it's really not them and us and them. It's something that could, hopefully not, but it could happen to anyone. So we are talking about, if you look at the whole planet, 1 billion people do have a disability. So that's already 15%. And as I said, it could be many more. So this is really not this kind of topic you can just say, yeah, well, it's a little technical thing. It's actually something that's affecting, yeah, almost a fifth of this planet. So when I'm saying that this if we say beauty or simple aesthetics or usability, if we say that it's beautiful to use, it should be usable for everyone. So form follows function really is the main thing to keep in mind here. And now that there's a law coming, it will become even more important. So to show you this, we do have one case study, unfortunately not more because time is tight. But for that, I would really like to ask you to close your eyes for a second. The whole room, please. No cheating. So, because I'm going to describe you the next slide, as somebody who does not see these slides would experience this. So listen carefully. Background image, boy with a blue and green shirt, looking at an app on a smartphone, white overlay, subheadline, case study, main headline, Berufswahl-App, parenthesis open, quotation mark open, career choice app, quotation mark close, parentheses close. Now you can open them again. And this is a slide. Did you experience that? How long it takes to just describe a simple PowerPoint slide with just a background image and one text overlay. So you can just imagine what incredible cognitive work goes into actually living in the highly complex digital world we have right now, and just imagine doing it without seeing it. Or on the other hand, if you're seeing it, but you aren't hearing anything, the whole world of motion and video becomes harder because you will have to actually read about this. So I hope you just got how hard this must be to actually have a barrier like that and having to depend on that. So the big project we did that made us realize how complex accessibility can be was this so-called Berufswahl-App, career choice app. It's a nationwide e-portfolio app for hopefully all students of Germany who will make their career or orientation with it. And it used to be, I mean, this is the app as it's looking now. It's PWA. So it's working on desktop and smartphones for those students who don't have a smartphone. And this was a big nationwide project based on a pedagogical concept. So until now, these students used to have like a big folder. You can imagine how many students like to use that. And so nobody was I mean, maybe some of you who come from Germany remember going to the Arbeitsamt and doing this kind of test. What am I going to be if I'm an adult? I should have been, I guess, a baker. So I became a UX designer. Yeah, that was on point. Not so. These students are going to get now this whole pedagogical concept in an app with the highest level of data protection, as you can imagine, because this is highly sensitive and personal stuff. I mean, the students, for example, even their parents don't have access to this app if the students don't give them permission to do that, or teachers. So all these advantages, again, you have this folder and then you digitalize it. That makes it, of course, more complicated to actually produce this product. But in the end, for the students, it's going to have a lot more pro sides because they can actually use the interactivity of it. And that will also help all the students who do have a disability. So when we started this project, we didn't think about the technical part first. We did think about the target group. So students and teachers in focus. So the whole app needed to be holistic, stereotype-free, inclusive, and culturally sensitive as well. So this whole design you're seeing was as far as one can go with modern UI. It already looks 2 years old, I have to say, but it's still, yeah, as classic as an UI can be, and the whole colors, for example, we did have them in mind to be this, this gradient between all the genders, between blue and pink. But of course, if you do this, just do it once. Just make your eyes a bit closed. Then you start seeing this in black and white. And that also helps to understand how design has to work in black and white if you don't see colors. Classic case, you have a text and you have a link and it's only blue. Somebody who wouldn't see contrast would never know that this is a link. So you would have to find another way to actually show this is a link, this is something interactive. Here you can see some of the functions we had. I'm not going to delve into the detail about this pedagogical concept now. I'm going to talk about how did we manage these, really big challenges in an interactive app that has to be motivating to students also to use for many, many years, because they start with this app when they are around 12 and 13, and then they leave school at either 16 or 19. Just imagine a closed text, Lückentext in German. So you have this text with blanks and you have to put in the right words. Of course, everybody of us is used to do this with drag and drop. How on earth am I going to make drag and drop without hands? So that's why the solution we found for this was using simple drop downs. You do have your text, and between there, when there's a blank, you have a drop down and you have all the options of the words that could go in, and then you choose the one. Or Tinder swiping, I like this, I don't like this. Swiping also really, really hard to do if you have problems with your hands, for example. So that's why we had to make it accessible via doing it with arrows that can be used via screen reader. Then, of course, we had to think about all these modes. For example, also the easy language, like the everyday language versus the easy language, and also the contrast mode. Now we're all talking about the dark mode. We just heard it in the keynote, but this isn't the dark mode as we know it. This is a dark mode that's easiest for people who have just a little bit of eyesight. So we did test with a school with students who are visually impaired, and we found out it's not the white and black, it's the yellow and black, which is much easier to the eye. So if you're remembering one thing, you can write down that hex code, because that was tested from a lot of different colors to be the actually best color for this. I just said, we did a lot of videos, and actually those took the longest time. We did have to make the so-called BITV-Zertifizierung. So it's the WCHG in German version, which is of course harder. How else could it be? So we did have to get that certification. And the longest part was actually getting videos to be accessible with subtitles, with sign language. And I'd have to tell you, I had to use the whole app with screen reader in order to be able to make these videos, so I could actually know what the challenges are in using this app. So that's really the mindset thing that I'm talking about. Actually, not just, taking the catalog of those certification points you have to check, but really getting into this and trying to understand how people with disabilities are using these apps and digital services. So the most important learnings from these projects were, of course, the stakeholders. Federal states of Germany, you can imagine how easy that was talking to them. They always said, oh, do we really have to do it this way? And we just told them, yes, we have to do it this way. It has to be accessible. It has to be culturally sensitive, holistic, and also as beautiful as possible. We are proud that we actually got the German Brand Award for this project, even if it was an completely accessible app. So design-wise, as I would say, not the most creative, but somehow we managed to find exactly that, middle way between, beautiful design for those 80 to 85% of people who don't have a disability, weighed up with these accessibility requirements. It's really important to not just assume stuff, but test it. That's basically, of course, true for all kinds of projects, and also not trying to, we are seeing with clients now that we are talking about this topic. There's a huge, this anxiety about this whole topic. There's nothing to be anxious about, because you do have quite clear regulations about this, and there is always a solution for every point. It just takes, some points take longer. And the earlier you take care of this and really start thinking in a project, setting this up as an accessible project, the easier it's going to be. We are going to face now, of course, the case all kinds of clients do have websites already. And now we have to, go later into this and trying to get it accessible afterwards. Of course, that's going to be more difficult than actually starting to think about. So what I would say, don't start a project without thinking about accessibility at day one. But to actually now come from this concrete case to some of the details, especially technical ones, Sebastian.
Thanks, Linnea. As all of you know, there is this guideline which consists about more than 100 items which you have to check the requirements to fulfill the WCAG norm. It's currently in version 2.2. In Germany, it's called the BETV 2.0. And I want to give you a summary about the most important topics of that criteria list. First of all, if you think about a website, you should have a really good structured navigation, but also, in addition, always a search functionality. Because if you can imagine, if you have a really deep navigation with multiple levels, and you remember the test Linnea did with you in the beginning to just describe this one easy image, if someone with blind disability has to go through this navigation by text and then maybe is in the wrong direction, need to start again from the beginning, that's really a huge time effort. And the search functionality is a much easier approach in this context. Of course, you need a good search functionality, but we come to that later. So basically, always provide these two approaches. And also an addition here is if you, for example, use images as navigation, always provide alt text because only the alt text are read out by the screen reader used by people with disabilities. If we talk about forms, input, and feedback, I think most of the websites have forms, at least for the contact form. Here, the most important criteria is that the label needs to be permanently visible. So meaning the label for each of the input fields. And if you, for example, give feedback to inputs to that form, this needs to be always correlated to the specific input field, and you need to give really precise information what was the error. If you remember, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I saw many websites where a contact form mistake was just outlined by a red outline on the input field, which was the information that this was wrongly inputted, and there was maybe an information error. That's not enough. So someone who is blind will never know what was wrong, what to correct. That's about forms. If we talk about non-text, for example, images or video, you have to provide alt text, title text for the images, and for videos, you always have to provide subtitles. There's also a specific way how to provide them. I will show you on one of the next slides. And of course, if you upload audio files, there should be also a transcript from these spoken words. Information and contact, you need your really good structure, headlines, H1 until H6 and so on. But I think that's commonly a common practice because of CEO requirements. So in my opinion, many of the websites are already fulfilling these criteria because they want to be highly ranked in search engines. Keyboard navigation, that's also a big topic. If you use tabulator, do basic click to the side via keyboard, not via mouse, you have to make sure that there's a really good structure, that you maybe not start in the top and then you click tabulator and you are somewhere on the other part of the site. So it needs to follow your structure and you have to outline this in your HTML code. Also touch and sensory navigation. Linnea also mentioned this. You have to find alternatives for these navigation solutions, which are commonly used on mobile phone nowadays. Animations, there should be no flashy animations because of epilepsy. And of course, you should be reduce these animations so that they are not so heavily used in these websites. And of course, you need a really good, perfect markup in your HTML code. To give you one examples about forms. There is in HTML, there's a new option to describe it starting with a prefix area. You see here some examples, area described by, area invalid, area error message. And if you look, it doesn't work. Wait. Oh, yeah. If you see here that the ID error message is also referred with these areas. So basically the input field is referring to the div layer, which holds, for example, the error message. So that the screen reader automatically knows which error message need to be shown when this specific input field was wrongly filled or not as suggested from the parameters, which are maybe checked by server-side code. And yeah, basically also you have to make sure that your tab index is set correctly so that you skip through the form in the correct order. And this can be also challenging if you, for example, have some grid layouts where form fields are next to each other and so on. So you have to really keep that into account that it's following the correct order. And if we talk about non-text media, then of course you also have these tags to add, for example, alt text, title text, a description text, and they're also ready for example, referring to the subtitles. There's a specific format called SAT. Maybe some video producers of you know this format already, and this can be provided to refer to the specific subtitles.
And just to give a short introduction to the user experience best practices. So, I mean, the most, the thing that comes into mind first are, of course, these color contrasts that need to be for the new law coming AA, so double A standard. Just single A standard won't be enough, but you also don't have to do the triple A. So triple A would be for really, really high, official software, for example. So the double A will suffice. For us as a designer, for example, UX designer, that's the way to start playing with it. So the basic information, that has to have the contrast. So like a text, which I'm reading, but for example, with the background, I can get creative with this because the background is not really like, for example, if you have a light blue background and you want to put a box on top of that and that would be white, that's not relevant info that it's in a box. Somebody who's not seeing these contrasts will still get the vital information in in a text that has enough contrast. So that's really the way to go in between aesthetic design and still making the most important relevant information visible. So that's going to be the middle part where we designers will have the most play with decorative elements. They don't have to be accessible, but the relevant information has to be. As I said, thinking black and white first, that's going to be the key. I've trained myself for 4 years now to really start when I'm doing a design, not thinking in color first. When I studied design, I wasn't allowed to use any colors in the first semester. So that's really something that as a designer you really learn, but that also will help you understand how people with these abilities, disabilities do see. Typography, for example, is not something that would be, would flag in the certification, but sans serif fonts are better readable. And also like making these, for example, the standard line height is always not enough. They do program these in 100 to 110% sometimes, web fonts, just the standard web fonts. Even in Google, Google has done better. They do at least have the 120%. But that's something, if you see a line height in automatic, please don't. Please up it until 133% at least. It's going to make everybody's lives easier reading texts. Then, of course, styling. These shadows wouldn't be enough to, if you really have something that you, for example, an active state, you have to use the contrast for that, because the active state with the outline does have to be enough. A simple shadow wouldn't be enough for this. And of course, these micro animations, again, as we said, the animations shouldn't be super flashy for people with epilepsy, but these little feedbacks that are now so easy to do, like a little arrow moving just a little bit to show you interactivity, please do so. That's really, really good UX, both for people with and without disabilities. Just not, I mean, the classic would be like the video in the hero. You can do that, but please put in a pause button so that people who don't want this kind of flashy video can actually deactivate this. And these interactive elements, as I already mentioned, they need a clear indication, an outline, an underline or an arrow. And if you use icons, I've talked a lot about this, again, because this is not in the regulations. I mean, icons, if they are really, really well known, for example, a search icon or a card, for example, these kind of icons, they don't need an additional description. But if you have some random icons, and we do use icons so much nowadays in web design, if you don't get what this icon is going to do, please describe it with a little text below it and put an alt token on it anyway. So why is this so important? The timeline is super tight now. I've been talking about this for years now, but now it's really only not a year anymore before this so-called Barrierefreiheitsstärkungsgesetz. Yeah, nice little word. The Accessibility Strengthening Act is coming into effect. So this has been planned for a long time. The EU in 2019, they already made the European Accessibility Act, and now all the EU countries are required to make their own laws about it. So it was regulated in Germany in 2022, and in June 28th of 2025, it's coming into effect. This, of course, now starts making people to panic. I'm saying, take care of this. Any new project should have accessibility in its center, but there is a grace period of 5 years, of course. So, because my prediction, as you can maybe remember with the cookie, when this cookie regulation came, the day that regulation came into effect, there were bots programmed that, just accused millions, hundreds and millions of companies who didn't have the cookie banner, for example. So that's my prediction. That's going to happen with this. This on 29th of June, bots are going to go crazy, and they're going to just tell so many companies, you're not accessible anymore. You're in the
Here, this could be the second biggest business for law companies, after the cookie bot scenario. So keep that in mind.
Exactly. But as I said, no need to panic, because that grace period is 5 years. But nevertheless, it's important that we start preparing this topic today, because I mean, I don't know how many of you are not in the clear website business, but for example, softwares and telephone services, messenger services, WhatsApp, etc., ebooks, banking services. I'm talking, for example, the Deutsche Bahn and Deutsche Bank, both. They have already talked to, the regulators of this law and said, we are not going to make this in time, because we have so many of these terminals, and to change them all into accessible ones, it's just going to take us even more time than those 5 years probably. So they are panicking, because they have like these huge, just physical devices that they have to make accessible now. We in the website business maybe can relax a little bit, but as I say, no new project should be done without accessibility in mind. And you can already start preparing those clients who are not accessible yet, preparing this. There's this big question always, is this going to affect my company? There are very clear regulations if you're in the electronic commerce, so all shops, etc. When you're exchanging money, that's going to be mandatory anyway. And also, even if you intend to do business via your website, how many websites without a contact form nowadays in the B2C area? Not so many. So in the second you have a contact form, you do intend to do business with your clients. So that's also going to make you eligible for this law. B2B is a sector that's not going to be affected straight away because this law is talking about consumers. But again, my prediction here is, for example, when responsive web design came, that wasn't a law. That was just, a big trend. And just months after, if your website wasn't responsive, you had a big Google SEO catastrophe because you were just downgraded if your page wasn't responsive. So my prediction is that's going to happen with accessibility as well. So the question, if a client says, well, do I have to do this now with this whole accessibility thing? We always saying, if you want to be sure, check with your lawyers, but also keep in mind, this is going to be one of the biggest waves, after the whole data protection thing. So please start taking care of this, even if you're not under this law now. Can everybody still hear me? World's collapsing. Okay. So and also keeping in mind, if you're doing this accessibility technique, it's also going to, as Sebastian also said, it's going to be good for SEO as well. And who wouldn't want to do business, in a better way? So preparing the pages in that way is not going to just, be good for the law, but also for SEO. So actually, everyone is going to benefit from an accessible website, not only the ones affected. And that's maybe the biggest takeaway from this law. Panic now, but it's actually a good trend. It's something that's making the world better. So how are we going to make this in projects? My biggest takeaway was compromising on this. So as I said, there's always this middle way in between, not making a design just in black and white. That would be the best thing for accessibility, but of course that's not an option. So finding the middle way, compromising a little bit on the design sometimes when I can't use, yellow text on white, obviously, versus I will make it as accessible as I can. So not having this kind of 100% perfection mode, but really start thinking around how I can work around this. Of course, it's about anticipating this. As I said, if you're taking care about this now, it's going to save you money. If you're taking now those maybe 10 or 20% more money that's accessibility is going to cost in a project versus I have to redo the whole thing, in a year. And of course, balancing these business requirements with the requirements of the accessibility. And so how this is how it's going to be in projects and in the whole world, or at least here in Europe, it's going to be this. The public sector has had to do with accessibility for years already. They have had this mandatory accessibility for years already, but now that this law is coming, it's going to go into the private sector, first into B2C, and as I'm predicting, in B2B as well in a few years, maybe. Then one more aspect is the teamwork, because I'm standing here now as a UX designer, but I wouldn't have been able to make this project without a lot of developer colleagues and also project managers who talk with the client about this, stakeholder management, etc. So it's really, projects with accessibility need a very, very close, agile thinking, thinking of all these disciplines. And also, and that's, I hope, the biggest takeaway you're taking today, this mindset. Don't think like a developer or a designer or a project manager. Think like a person with a barrier, which could be, unfortunately, any one of you, anytime, and then act accordingly. So now a little test. to the end. Find the mistake in this graphic. Anybody? An idea?
The colors.
So what about this?
Someone with a disability, according to the colors, can see what's exclusion.
Exactly. Wow. This is the first time actually that I've had a correct answer because I mean, this is a lot of input, but that's exactly what's happening. So if somebody can't see colors, the middle and the right graphic is going to look exactly the same. And this is from a page, leserlich.info, best site for the user experience side of this. They did it wrong. Like it's an old graphic now, but I just find this a very good example of how much we assume to know, and then we just still, just fail at this basic thing. Yeah. And so one solution to, of course, to do this would be an additional outline or adding a structure on this. But please don't, I mean, just go through the world thinking in black and white, and you will realize how much color coding, for example, there is in this world. I mean, there are these, the red, yellow, and green little, papers with which you vote. Not good idea. They are going to look gray to some of, or if you have a red and actually the red and green blindness, I guess it's called. That's actually very, very. There are huge numbers of people who have this. I'm sure somebody in this room is going to have that. So don't do it just with the color. Add a text to it or a structure or something explaining that. I found this little sign in my hometown, and I was kind of happy for the people who actually have a disability because they can actually read this sign because it has the braille on it. I can't read this because the font is just, I mean, come on, who can actually read this? Fachanwalt. Oh, okay. So I just found this interesting example where something is done, even more better for the ones with disability and not taking care of those who can see. And so one last slide for, of course, the topic of AI.
Thanks. Yeah, in our opinion, AI already plays a huge role in terms of accessibility. If you can imagine, there are already really nice search engines out there which using AI to create a much better search experience for the users. So this is a big advantage here, and they're going to get much better in the future. Also, speech to text, there are many third-party solutions out there which can be integrated really easy by JavaScript to make your content read out. And this will also be much better in the future by AI, especially when we talk about automatic translations and so on. Image to text, there's also the possibility to send images to AI and get a really good description what's shown on the image. And for example, in Typo 3, you can set up a scheduler task which gets all the images out of your data, send it to the AI, get the description and save it, because the advantage of Typo 3 is that we have all images in a really structured way stored in the database. So for example, for our content elements, we have a field dedicated to images. We have a field dedicated to the description, so that can be easily used, especially in Typo 3. And of course, automated translations. I think many of you already use DeepL in projects to get automated translations and provide this to the users of the website. Yeah, that's it from us. Thank you really much for watching this talk and hearing this talk, of course. And as many of you take pictures, if you follow us on Instagram, we will upload the presentation afterwards on our website, and then you can download it if you want. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, so we're just going to leave these QR codes here so you can actually check them. This is just as I already mentioned, the leserlich.info is a really good page dedicated to those with eyesight disability. My favorite color contrast tool, I know there are millions of color contrast tools now, also integrated into all these softwares, but I haven't seen so many who already do the AAA standard. So that's a really good one. It doesn't have almost a design, but sometimes, as I say, for a color contrast, you don't need the best design for this. If you want to check how things should be done in a UX way, and probably also I haven't looked at the code, but this einfach teilhaben, it's a page about accessibility, but that's a good best practice. And we also just wrote a very, very short article, 29 minutes of reading time about accessible apps. So feel welcome to read that if you need more information. Questions? Yes.
Thank you for the talk and all the nice ideas for thinking about how do you make the accessibility menu accessible. So that's also, I guess, the afterthought to integrate extra menu just for the settings.
I mean, you've seen it probably on many websites. In the meta navigation, you now have these. You can change the font, you can change the color, etc. Our experience is now you can integrate those in the meta navigation if you want to. But one other way to do is simply use a plugin. There are now so many plugins coming onto the market. You can just put it on the site. We're just really, really, careful with these scripts because they do give you the impression. Then you just put in, a script on your website and then the page is accessible. No freaking way. They only make sure that the menu itself is accessible. But that doesn't, if you have a shitty code behind that, it's not going to, fix that. But of course, these kind of scripts do exist. For example, if you want to see one in action, go on Köln, that's our hometown where we come from, Cologne. So Köln, stadtköln.de, you can check that. They have this, it's called Eyeable, so Eyeable. So there are these scripts, but as I say, they are great, and they then again have so many, filters you can use. You couldn't conceive that by yourself. So that's why I'm saying, think about making your page, accessible. Maybe, offering this kind of script on top of that if you really want to make sure, but not forgetting that basically also with now AI on the rise, so many disabled people, they have their tool set which they like to use, and you will not be able to cater to all those needs. So make the basic accessibility sure, and then just maybe let people use the tools they want to use. Just prepare your page for that. And no plugin on this planet is going to just, magically make your page accessible, unfortunately. Maybe in, I don't know how many years. AI, 5 years, for example, this grace period, that's it's an eternity in senses of AI. My prediction, once this grace period is over, this whole accessibility law is, already outdated because everybody will have other ways to use this. Yes.
So I have a question about. I think there's a lot of confusion when what this law is concerned. And the way I understood it is beginning middle next year, websites that meet certain criteria need to be accessible. But the way I understood it, it's not a yes or no question. Could you maybe talk a little bit about a spectrum on how to evaluate websites? Like you showed an example using fonts. So if you have a corporate design guy using serif fonts, will that using those fonts make the website non-accessible? I assume not. So there's a spectrum of criteria you need to meet. And how do you actually define this is an accessible website and this is not?
WCHG. That's your catalog of things. So all these kinds of additional things that I talked about, for example, the making, choosing fonts, for example, that are better legible, this isn't something that the law is going to tell you. Or which colors are better, for example. I mean, for example, red text, there is a red color that matches the contrast. It's like a darkish red, but maybe it's not the best idea to use red for a text because it's going to alert you. Then it would be better to use a blue text. So that's what I'm saying. If you want to know how a website becomes accessible, just go down that list. That's the only thing that is regulated by the law. But as I said, I hope we all will get a different mindset about this and not just checking those items, but actually getting into, accessible user experiences, accessible customer journeys, all this that, is this whole world of, digital experience. I hope all that is going to be accessible, but that's, a plus. That's just an option. That's something that's how you're going to make it even better. But for the actual regulation, it's just, the catalog.
And of course, you have to meet this catalog in 100%. There are currently companies already outside to do this test for you and give you a certificate that you met all the criteria. The criteria are also written really well. Of course, you can think there may be some room for negotiation if it's fulfilled or not. There are many or tiny options for that, but it's written really well. So it's really hard to pass all these requirements, and it's a lot of effort, but it can be done. And especially when you take it into account by designing, programming the website from beginning. If you do it later on, it's much more effort. Just ping me on LinkedIn. You find my contact data here, and I can send you some contact we are familiar with already.
Maybe just telling you from the experience, I mean, we did have to get that official certification for that Berufswahl app. So that's only because, the federal states of Germany were involved. I mean, the pages, this law doesn't say that you have to make this official certification, but that's something that you will have to track now. And also once in June, next June is going to, as I said, that's something that you can't look into the future, but I'm so pretty sure that on 29th of June, the world is, I mean, Germany is going to flare up because of this, because there are going to be so many bots, just, screening sites and telling them, yeah, well, you're not accessible by this. So I guess, and as I said, Deutsche Bank and Deutsche Bahn have already talked to the highest, law regulators and just saying, how are we going to deal with this? This is an impossible task for us. So that's what I'm saying. There is a law coming, but the reality is going to show what's actually going to happen with this. The only thing that we can do is prepare as much as possible. Other questions? Yes, sure.
Remember me back in the days where there are mobile versions of a website. I think similar topic. Now we are in the responsive world, and I think that's a much better approach to find a solution which works for all visitors of your website.
I mean, the page you're referring to, it's this, for example, you also have, all the pages will have to have that Erklärung der Barrierefreiheit. So it's like a statement for the accessibility. So that's like the first thing you can do. You can put on that text. There are just, just templates. You can just copy the text. And then you can just say, well, there is, in my federal state, there's a contact where I can flag this or say this is accessible and this is not. And while this is sounding very, regulatory, that's what makes it beautiful for me, because as I said, I have been thinking about this now for 4 and 5 years, and I imagine to have quite a good grasp of this. But of course, I don't have that disability, so I want to get into into a conversation with those people. So actually putting that on your webpage, it's so, just one more thing I have to do. No, I guess it will help you actually getting into contact with your target group who is actually using your page. And if you have that link in the footer, and then you have that, text saying, if you find a barrier we haven't thought about, here's a contact, you can actually flag us, and then we are going to make this better. So this is basically opening this whole test phase, for the whole web world, how we are going to achieve accessibility that the law hasn't, thought about. That's what I'm saying. It's not just about now checking the items in the law. It's actually about making this world better and more accessible to everyone. Because really, that's also one question that I ask clients, can you really afford not thinking about accessibility, Or can you not afford thinking about ecological, things, or, responsible production, etc.? I think that's the same topic that's now in the world, to make it a more inclusive space. So you get why it's a topic close to my heart, because it's, just not one of those. And also data protection. Of course, data protection was something, I mean, we all, are annoyed by this cookie thing we have to, check away, but it actually protects us of so many dangers, as we know. Yes. And that's, I guess, the last question. Yeah, perfect. And we heard today in the keynote that the V13 is already having more accessibility features. So it's happening.